The sound wasn't a gavel. It was a crack like a gunshot in a silent library. In the sterile, fluorescent corridor outside the courtroom, that sound stopped time. Everyone froze. The clerks, the witnesses, the trembling rookie officer. Officer Peter Stokes, a towering man who wore his uniform like a suit of armor, grinned. He had just backhanded Rebecca Cross, a dignified black MP, across the face during the recess. He thought his badge made him a god. He thought she would crumble in fear. He was wrong. 3 seconds later, Stokes was on his back, eyes rolled into his head, twitching on the linoleum. Rebecca hadn't just slapped him back. With the precision of a former champion, she had turned his lights out cold. But as the other officers swarmed her, handcuffs clicking shut, and the physical fight was over, and the real war was only just beginning. Rebecca Cross had been an MP for 6 years. She'd survived character assassinations, death threats scrawled on her office windows, and late-night votes designed to break her spirit. She'd stood in Parliament and called out ministers by name, her voice steady even as they shouted her down. But nothing, not the vitriol, not the isolation, not the endless grind of representing a district the government had written off, had prepared her for the feeling of Officer Peter Stokes' open palm cracking across her face. The world tilted. Her cheek burned. The fluorescent lights above seemed to flicker and hum louder, as if the building itself had gasped. Stokes stood over her, all 6'4" of him, his chest puffed out beneath the crisp lines of his uniform. His badge caught the light. His grin was slow, satisfied, the kind of smile a man wears when he knows he's untouchable. Around them, the corridor had gone still. The clerks clutching their folders, the witnesses waiting to be called. The trembling rookie officer whose name Rebecca didn't know. Everyone had frozen, as if movement itself might shatter the fragile membrane between civilization and chaos. "You've got a mouth on you, don't you?" Stokes said, his voice low and thick with contempt. "Always running it in there." He jerked his head toward the courtroom doors. "Thought you could come in here and make us look like animals. Thought your little speech would change something." Rebecca's ears were ringing. She could taste copper. Her vision sharpened, the way it always did before a fight, back when she was younger, and the ring was the only place she felt in control. She saw the veins in Stokes's neck, the slight sway in his stance, the way his weight was too far forward, cocky, unguarded. He thought she would crumble. He thought the suit and the pearls and the carefully modulated voice she used in Parliament meant she was soft. He thought wrong. "You don't get to put your hands on me," Rebecca said quietly. Her voice didn't shake. It never shook. Stokes laughed, a short, ugly bark. "What are you going to do about it, love? File a complaint?" He leaned in closer, his breath hot and sour. "Who do you think they'll believe?" 3 seconds. That's all it took. Rebecca's body moved before her mind could catch up, muscle memory from a life she'd left behind flooding back in a rush. She shifted her weight, her right foot sliding back into a fighter's stance. Stokes's eyes widened, but only for a fraction of a second, not enough time to process what was happening. Her left hand came up in a feint, drawing his attention high, and then her right fist drove forward, a sharp, brutal jab to his solar plexus that folded him forward like a collapsing tent. He gasped, the air punching out of his lungs, and Rebecca didn't hesitate. She pivoted, her hips twisting with the precision of 1,000 hours in the gym, and her shin connected with the side of his head in a roundhouse kick that sounded like a bat hitting a watermelon. Stokes's eyes rolled back. His knees buckled. He went down hard, his skull bouncing once against the linoleum with a sickening thud, and then he was still. twitching, out cold. The corridor erupted. Someone screamed. The rookie officer stumbled backward, his hand flying to his radio. The clerks scattered like startled birds, and Rebecca stood there, her chest heaving, her fist still clenched, staring down at the man who had thought his badge made him a god. For a moment, she felt nothing but the electric hum of adrenaline, the same rush she used to chase in the ring. Victory, clean and absolute. Then the other officers came. They swarmed her from both ends of the corridor, their boots thundering against the floor, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of shouts. Hands grabbed her arms, wrenched them behind her back. The cold bite of metal handcuffs snapped around her wrists, too tight, pinching skin. Someone shoved her forward, and she stumbled, catching herself against the wall. "You're done," one of them hissed in her ear. "You just assaulted a police officer." Rebecca turned her head, at her eyes locking onto the man speaking. His face was red, twisted with rage, but beneath it, she saw something else. Fear. They were afraid of her, afraid of what she'd just done, afraid of what it meant. "He hit me first," she said, her voice steady even as they dragged her toward the stairwell. "Everyone saw it." But as she looked back over her shoulder, she saw the truth in their faces. The clerks had already turned away. The witnesses were being ushered into side rooms. The rookie officer was staring at the floor, his jaw clenched. No one was going to say a word. The physical fight was over. The real war had only just begun. They didn't take her to an interview room. They took her to the basement. Rebecca had been in police stations before, but always through the front door, always with a purpose. Community meetings, constituent complaints. That one time she'd accompanied a terrified teenager whose brother had been arrested, making sure the boy wasn't forgotten in the system. She'd walked those sterile hallways with her head high, her MP credentials a shield that commanded a certain grudging respect. Not anymore. The officers who dragged her down the back stairwell didn't speak to her. They spoke around her, over her, as if she'd already ceased to exist as a person and had become merely a problem to be processed. Their grip on her arms was unnecessarily tight, fingers digging into the soft flesh above her elbows hard enough to bruise. She didn't give them the satisfaction of wincing. The basement smelled like disinfectant and something older, something that had seeped into the concrete over decades. Desperation, maybe. Fear. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in a sickly yellow-green that made her skin look corpse-pale. They shoved her into a holding cell at the end of a narrow corridor. The door clanged shut with a finality that echoed in her chest. Through the small window, she could see them conferring in low voices, their backs to her, shoulders hunched like conspirators. Rebecca sat down on the metal bench bolted to the wall and forced herself to breathe. In through the nose, out through the mouth. The same rhythm she'd used before fights, before debates, before every moment in her life when she'd needed to be more than her fear. Her cheek still throbbed where Stokes had hit her. She could feel it swelling, the heat of it spreading across her face. Evidence. She needed to document this, needed photographs, needed a medical examination before the bruise faded. She needed her lawyer. She needed to get out of here. Time moved strangely in the cell. It could have been 10 minutes or an hour when she finally heard footsteps approaching. Heavy, confident footsteps that didn't belong to the nervous shuffle of the rookie officer or the aggressive stomp of the men who'd arrested her. The door opened. A man stepped inside, and Rebecca's stomach dropped. He was in his 50s, broad-shouldered and silver-haired, wearing a suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent. His tie was perfectly knotted. His shoes gleamed. He carried a leather briefcase in one hand and an expression of practiced sympathy on his face. "Miss Cross," he said, his voice smooth as oil. "I'm Gerald Pritchard. I represent the Police Federation." Rebecca stared at him. "I didn't ask for you." "No," Pritchard agreed, setting his briefcase down on the bench beside her with deliberate care. "But I'm here, nonetheless, as a courtesy." He smiled, and it didn't reach his eyes. "These situations can be delicate. I wanted to make sure you understood your position before things escalate unnecessarily." "My position," Rebecca repeated slowly, "is that one of your officers assaulted me, and I defended myself. That's not delicate. That's criminal." Pritchard's smile thinned. He sat down, uninvited, close enough that she could smell his cologne. Expensive. Cloying. "Officer Stokes is currently in hospital," he said. "Concussion. Possible skull fracture. The doctors are still running tests." He paused, letting that sink in. "He's a decorated officer. 15 years of service. Commendations for bravery. A wife and 2 children. "He put his hands on me first," Rebecca said, her voice hard. "There were witnesses." "Were there?" Pritchard tilted his head, his expression almost pitying. "From what I understand, the corridor was quite chaotic. Emotions were running high after the hearing. People saw different things." The implication hung in the air between them like smoke. Rebecca's hands clenched into fists on her lap. "You're here to threaten me." "I'm here to help you," Pritchard corrected gently. "You're an intelligent woman, Miss Cross. You understand how these things work. You've been in politics long enough to know that perception matters more than truth. Right now, the perception is that a member of Parliament violently assaulted a police officer in a courthouse. That's not a good look for anyone." "He hit me," Rebecca said again, slower this time, as if speaking to a child. "I have a witness. I have a bruise on my face. I have a history of competitive kickboxing," Pritchard interrupted smoothly. "Regional champion, weren't you, before you went into politics? Quite the fighter." He opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder, flipping it open to reveal printed pages. Photographs. Articles from local sports magazines, years old, showing a younger Rebecca in fighting stance, gloves raised, eyes fierce. Her blood ran cold. "We're not trying to make this difficult," Pritchard continued, at his tone almost conversational. "We're simply trying to establish context. A trained fighter, a woman with documented anger issues. I don't have anger issues. Who has been vocal in her criticism of the police force, who has made inflammatory statements in Parliament, who has, by her own admission, been antagonistic toward law enforcement." He closed the folder. "And who, when confronted by an officer during a stressful situation, responded with disproportionate violence." Rebecca felt the walls closing in. This wasn't an interview. This wasn't even an interrogation. This was a script, already written, and she was being fitted into the role they'd chosen for her. "Where is my lawyer?" she demanded. Pritchard checked his watch. "I'm sure they'll be here soon. Traffic in the city, you know how it is." He stood, smoothing his tie. "In the meantime, I'd encourage you to think carefully about your next steps. We can resolve this quietly. A statement of regret, anger management courses, perhaps a temporary leave from your position while things cool down. Or," he paused at the door, his hand on the frame, "we can do this the hard way." The door closed behind him with a soft click. Rebecca sat alone in the cell, her heart pounding, and understood with perfect clarity that she was no longer an MP. She was prey, and the hunt had already begun. The security office on the third floor of the courthouse was small, cramped, and smelled like burnt coffee and stale cigarettes. 3 monitors lined the desk, each split into quadrants showing different angles of hallways, courtrooms, and entrances. The footage rolled in silent loops, grainy and colorless, capturing the mundane choreography of justice. Lawyers hurrying with briefcases, defendants shuffling in chains, clerks pushing carts stacked with files. Detective Sergeant Marcus Webb stood behind the security guard's chair, his arms crossed, watching the screens with the patience of a man who'd done this before. "There," he said, pointing to the top right quadrant. "That's the third-floor corridor. Timestamp shows 14:47. Rewind it." The guard, a nervous man in his 60s named Colin, fumbled with the controls. His hands shook slightly as he dragged the timeline backward. The footage jerked in reverse, people walking backward, doors opening and closing in the wrong direction, time unspooling. "Stop," Webb said. The image froze. The corridor was empty except for 2 figures at the far end, barely visible in the frame. One tall and broad, one smaller, slimmer. The angle was wrong to see faces clearly, but the uniforms were unmistakable. Colin leaned closer to the screen, squinting. "Is that? Don't worry about what it is," Webb said quietly. "Just pull the file." I'm not supposed to." Webb's hand came down on Colin's shoulder, heavy and firm. Not quite a threat. Not quite friendly. "Colin. Mate, you've been doing this job for what, 20 years? You know how things work. Sometimes files get corrupted. Sometimes there's a glitch in the system. Happens all the time, doesn't it?" Colin's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed. "Sometimes," he whispered. "Right. So pull the file. External drive. Then we'll take care of the rest." Colin's fingers moved across the keyboard, slower now, reluctant. The progress bar appeared on the screen, filling incrementally as the footage downloaded. 3%, 7%, 15%. Webb watched the corridor behind them through the office's glass window. Empty. The courthouse was clearing out for the day, the usual post-session exodus. Timing was everything. "How long?" he asked. 2 minutes, maybe 3. Webb nodded. He pulled out his phone and typed a quick message. "Package secured. Proceeding to step 2. The reply came almost instantly. "Good. Clean it up." The progress bar hit 100%. Colin ejected the drive and held it out with a trembling hand. Webb took it, slipping it into his jacket pocket. "Now delete the original," Webb said. "Delete it?" Colin's voice cracked. "I can't just delete it. There's protocols, logs, people will ask." "Maintenance error," Webb said, his tone hardening. "The system's been acting up for weeks, hasn't it? You've filed reports. I've seen them. Freezing. Dropped frames. It's a miracle this old equipment still works at all." He leaned down, his face level with Colin's. "Tonight, the hard drive for camera 12 had a catastrophic failure. Corrupted the files. You tried to recover them, but it was too late. These things happen. Technology's unreliable." Colin stared at the screen, at the frozen image of the corridor, at the 2 figures who would disappear in a moment. "There were witnesses," he said weakly. "People saw what happened." "People see what they want to see," Webb said, "or what they're told to see. Your job is the footage, so delete it." For a long moment, Colin didn't move. Then slowly, his hand returned to the keyboard. A few keystrokes. A confirmation dialog box appeared. "Are you sure you want to permanently delete this file?" Colin's finger hovered over the enter key. "Think about your pension," Webb said softly. "Think about your grandkids. Think about how much easier life is when you don't make waves. Colin pressed enter. The file vanished. The screen went blank. The corridor, the figures, the evidence, all of it erased as if it had never existed. Webb straightened, patting Colin on the shoulder. Good man. I'll make sure the right people know you were cooperative. He left the security office and took the stairs down, his footsteps echoing in the empty stairwell. 2 floors below, in a conference room that had been commandeered for the afternoon, 4 officers sat around a table. They looked up as Webb entered, their faces tight with tension. The rookie, Constable Evans, looked like he might be sick. His face was pale, his hands clasped together so tightly his knuckles had gone white. "Is it done?" asked Sergeant Hale, a thick-necked man with 20 years on the force and a reputation for loyalty to his own. Webb tossed the external drive onto the table. "It's done. Footage is gone. Maintenance error. Colin will file the report tomorrow." Hale nodded, satisfied. "Right. Now let's make sure we're all on the same page." He pulled out a notepad, flipping it open to a page covered in neat handwriting. "This is what happened. We go over it until we can recite it in our sleep." He looked around the table, making eye contact with each officer in turn. Officer Stokes was escorting witnesses during the recess. MP Cross approached him in the corridor. She was agitated, aggressive. She'd been making accusations all day in the courtroom, inflammatory statements about police conduct. "She started shouting," added Officer Brennan, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue. "Getting in his face." "Right," Hale continued. Stokes tried to de-escalate, calm her down. But she was out of control. She took a swing at him. "He raised his hands to defend himself," Brennan said. "And she kicked him," Hale finished. "Full force. Knocked him unconscious. We responded immediately, restrained her, called for medical assistance." Evans was shaking his head, his lips pressed into a thin line. "Problem, Constable?" Webb asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "That's not what happened," Evans said, his voice barely above a whisper. "He hit her first. I saw it. We all saw it." The room went silent. Hale leaned forward, his elbows on the table. "What you saw," he said slowly, "was a chaotic situation. High stress. Things happened fast. Memory's a funny thing, Evans. Unreliable. Especially when you're new, when you're not used to the pressure." "I know what I saw," Evans insisted, but his voice wavered. Webb walked around the table and stood behind Evans' chair. "You're a good officer," he said. "Got a bright future ahead of you. Be a shame to throw it away over a misunderstanding." He paused. "Be a real shame if you ended up on the wrong side of this. Alone." Evans stared down at his hands. The silence stretched, suffocating. "Don't," Hale said, his pen poised over the notepad. "Let's try this again. What did you see, Constable Evans?" Evans closed his eyes. When he opened them, something inside him had broken. "She attacked first," he whispered. Hale smiled. "Good lad. Now let's run through it one more time. From the top." The flash of cameras hit Rebecca like a physical blow the moment she stepped through the station doors. She'd been released at dawn, a calculated move designed to catch her at her worst. No makeup to cover the bruise that had bloomed across her cheek in shades of purple and yellow. No time to prepare a statement. No opportunity to control the narrative. Just her lawyer, Diane Chen, gripping her elbow and murmuring, "Don't say anything. Don't react. Just walk," as they pushed through the scrum of reporters that had materialized like vultures sensing carrion. The questions came in a barrage, overlapping, aggressive, designed to provoke. "Ms. Cross, did you attack Officer Stokes? Is it true you have a history of violence? Do you regret assaulting a decorated police officer? Will you resign from Parliament? Rebecca kept her eyes forward, her jaw clenched, her body moving on autopilot. Diane's car was parked at the curb, engine running. 20 feet. 15. 10. A reporter stepped directly into her path, a young woman with predatory eyes and a microphone thrust forward like a weapon. Ms. Cross, the public deserves to know. Are you a danger to the community? Something inside Rebecca snapped. She stopped, and Diane's grip tightened in warning, but it was too late. The public deserves to know, Rebecca said, her voice cutting through the chaos. Why a police officer felt entitled to assault a member of Parliament in a courthouse and face no consequences. The cameras loved it. The flashes intensified, a strobe light frenzy. The reporters surged forward, shouting follow-up questions, but Diane was already pulling her toward the car, practically shoving her into the back seat. The door slammed shut. The noise became muffled, distant. Diane climbed into the driver's seat and pulled away from the curb with more speed than was strictly legal. I told you not to say anything, Diane said, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. I know. They're going to use that. They're going to twist it into... I know, Rebecca said again, leaning her head back against the seat. She closed her eyes. I know. By the time they reached Rebecca's flat in Brixton, the damage was already done. Diane's phone had been buzzing non-stop during the drive. Now, sitting at Rebecca's kitchen table with a laptop open between them, she scrolled through the headlines with the grim efficiency of a coroner cataloguing injuries. MP gone wild. Rebecca Cross attacks officer, Diane read aloud. That's the Sun. The Mail went with violent MP. Cross knocked cop unconscious in courthouse rampage. The Telegraph is slightly more restrained. MP arrested after altercation with police officer. But they've got a photo of you from your kickboxing days on the front page, so the implication is clear. Rebecca stared at the screen. The photograph was from 15 years ago, taken at a regional championship. She was younger, leaner, her face twisted in mid-shout, her leg frozen in a high kick. Out of context, she looked feral, dangerous. They're not even pretending to be objective, Rebecca said quietly. They don't have to be, Diane replied. The police gave them a narrative, and it's a good one. Angry black woman with a history of violence attacks a hero cop. It writes itself. She closed the laptop with more force than necessary. We need to get ahead of this. We need witnesses. We need that CCTV footage. The footage is gone, Rebecca said. I'd bet my career on it. You might be betting your freedom on it, Diane shot back. They're charging you with assault occasioning actual bodily harm. If convicted, you're looking at up to 5 years. The number hung in the air between them. 5 years. Rebecca thought of her daughter, Amara, 16 years old, and already too aware of how the world worked. 5 years of her life, gone, while 5 years of watching her mother become a cautionary tale. Rebecca's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and felt her stomach drop. The message was from Martin Ashford, the party whip. It was brief, clinical, devastating. We need to talk. My office. 2 p.m. She showed Diane the message. They're going to suspend me. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Ashford's office in Westminster was all dark wood and leather, the kind of room designed to make you feel small. He sat behind his desk, his expression carefully neutral, while Rebecca stood in front of him like a student called to the headmaster's office. Sit down, Rebecca, he said. She remained standing. Just say it, Martin. He sighed, removing his glasses and pinching the bridge of his nose. The party leadership has decided that, given the seriousness of the allegations against you, it would be prudent to suspend your membership pending the outcome of the legal proceedings. Prudent, Rebecca repeated, tasting the word. That's what we're calling it. You assaulted a police officer, Rebecca. I defended myself against a police officer who assaulted me first. That's not what the reports say. The reports are lie. Ashford put his glasses back on, his eyes hard. That may be, but perception is reality in politics. And right now, the perception is that you're a liability. The party can't afford to be associated with— With what? Rebecca interrupted. With someone who fought back. With someone who didn't just take it. With someone who's become a distraction, Ashford said flatly. We have an election coming up. We have seats to defend. We can't have one of our MPs dominating the news cycle because she couldn't control her temper. Rebecca laughed, a short, bitter sound. My temper. Right. Not the officer who put his hands on me. Not the system that's protecting him. My temper is the problem. I'm sorry, Rebecca. The decision's been made. She turned to leave, then stopped at the door. You know what the worst part is, Martin? I actually believed you lot were different. I thought we stood for something. We stand for winning, Ashford said. Everything else is negotiable. Rebecca walked out of Westminster for what might be the last time, past the tourists taking photographs and the protesters waving signs, past the armed police who watched her with expressions she couldn't read. Her phone buzzed again. Another message. Then another. On her inbox was flooding with emails, most of them vicious, some threatening. She stopped on Westminster Bridge, looking out at the Thames, at the city she'd fought so hard to serve. The water was grey and choppy, indifferent to her crisis. Diane had been right. She was alone now. No party backing, no institutional support. Just her lawyer, and the truth that no one seemed interested in hearing. Her phone rang. She almost didn't answer, but the number was familiar. Amara. Mum? Her daughter's voice was small, frightened. Mum, there are reporters outside the house. They're taking pictures. They're asking the neighbors about you. Rebecca closed her eyes, her hand tightening on the phone. Lock the doors, baby. Don't answer any questions. I'm coming home. She hung up and started walking, faster now, purpose replacing despair. They wanted to make her a villain. They wanted to isolate her, break her, force her into submission. They had no idea who they were dealing with. Diane found him 3 days later, buried in the witness list, like a footnote no one expected anyone to read. Constable James Evans, 24 years old, 2 years on the force, present in the corridor during the incident. His statement, filed with the others, was brief to the point of suspicious. Witnessed altercation between Officer Stokes and Ms. Cross. Ms. Cross initiated physical contact. Officer Stokes defended himself. Ms. Cross delivered incapacitating strike. It's too clean, Diane said, spreading the documents across Rebecca's kitchen table. Look at the others. Hale's statement is 3 pages. Brennan's is 2.5. They've got details, descriptions, timelines. Evans gives us 6 sentences. Rebecca leaned over the papers, her reading glasses perched on her nose. The bruise on her face had faded to a sickly yellow-green, but it was still visible enough that she'd stopped going outside during daylight hours. The reporters had set up a semi-permanent camp on her street, and she'd become a prisoner in her own home. 6 sentences, she repeated, because he's saying what he was told to say, and he can't bring himself to elaborate. That's my read, Diane said. He's the youngest officer present, the newest, the one with the most to lose if he breaks ranks. She pulled out another sheet, this one printed from social media, a photograph of a young man in uniform, his smile nervous, his eyes earnest. He's also the only one who doesn't have a complaint history, clean record, commendations for community engagement. By all accounts, he's one of the good ones. Which means he's the weak link, Rebecca said. Which means he might tell the truth if we can get to him before they shore up his resolve. Rebecca studied the photograph. Evans looked like someone's son, someone's brother. He looked like the kind of officer she'd once believed the force was full of, before experience had taught her otherwise. "Where is he?" she asked. "Brixton Station. Works the day shift, usually on patrol. I've got his schedule." Rebecca looked up sharply. "How did you get his schedule?" Diane's expression was carefully neutral. "I have sources." "Diane." "Don't ask questions you don't want answered," Diane said. "The point is, he finishes his shift at 6. He usually stops at a cafe on Cold Harbor Lane before heading home. The Copper Kettle. Ironic name. I know." Rebecca was already standing, reaching for her jacket. "Wait," Diane said. "You can't just approach him. If anyone sees you talking to a witness, I'm not going to intimidate him," Rebecca said. "I'm going to tell him the truth, that he doesn't have to lie for them, that there's another way." "Rebecca, if this goes wrong, it's already wrong," Rebecca said. "It can't get much worse." She was incorrect about that, but she wouldn't know it until later. The Copper Kettle was the kind of place that survived on regulars and nostalgia, with mismatched chairs and a chalkboard menu that hadn't changed in years. Rebecca sat in the corner booth, a cold cup of tea in front of her, a baseball cap pulled low over her face. She'd taken the back streets to get here, checking over her shoulder every few minutes, and feeling ridiculous and paranoid and justified all at once. Evans arrived at 6:15, still in uniform, his shoulders slumped with exhaustion. He ordered at the counter, coffee black and a sandwich he probably wouldn't finish, and found a table by the window. Rebecca watched him for a moment. He looked even younger in person, his face unlined, his movements carrying the careful precision of someone still learning the choreography of his job. He pulled out his phone, scrolled for a moment, then set it down and stared out the window with an expression that made Rebecca's chest tighten. He looked haunted. She stood and crossed the cafe before she could second-guess herself. Evans didn't notice her until she was standing beside his table. "Constable Evans," she said quietly. He looked up, and the color drained from his face. "Across." He started to stand, his hand instinctively moving toward his radio. "Please," Rebecca said, holding up her hands. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I just want to talk." "I can't." Evans glanced around the cafe, his panic visible. "You shouldn't be here. If anyone sees—" "Then let's make this quick," Rebecca said. She sat down across from him, uninvited. "I read your statement. 6 sentences. Very economical." Evans's jaw tightened. "I told the truth." "Did you?" Rebecca leaned forward, her voice low and urgent. "Because I was there too, Constable. I know what happened. And I know what you saw." "I saw you attack Officer Stokes," Evans said, but his voice lacked conviction. He couldn't meet her eyes. "He hit me first," Rebecca said. "You saw it. You were standing right there. He cornered me. He put his hands on me. And I defended myself. That's the truth, and you know it." Evans' hands were shaking. He clasped them together on the table, his knuckles white. "I gave my statement. I'm not changing it." "I'm not asking you to change it," Rebecca said. "I'm asking you to tell the truth, in court, when it matters." "You don't understand," Evans said, his voice cracking. "You don't know what they're like, what they'll do." "I know exactly what they're like," Rebecca said. "I know they're protecting a man who thinks his badge gives him the right to assault people. I know they've erased evidence and coached witnesses and built a case on lies. And I know that you're better than that, Evans finally looked at her, and she saw the war happening behind his eyes. Fear and conscience, battling for dominance. "I have a career," he said weakly. "A future." "What if I go against them?" "You'll have a conscience," Rebecca said. "You'll be able to look at yourself in the mirror. That has to count for something." For a moment, she thought she'd reached him. His expression softened, his shoulders sagged, and he opened his mouth to speak. Then his phone buzzed. He glanced down at the screen, and whatever he saw there made him go rigid. "I have to go," he said, standing abruptly. "Don't contact me again." "Evans, please!" But he was already moving toward the door, his coffee abandoned, his sandwich untouched. Rebecca watched him go, frustration and desperation warring in her chest. Her own phone buzzed a moment later, a message from Diane. "Call me, now." Rebecca stepped outside into the early evening air and dialed. Diane answered on the first ring. "They've transferred him," Diane said without preamble. "Evans, as of this morning, he's been reassigned to a station in Surrey, effective immediately." Rebecca felt the ground shift beneath her feet. "That's not a coincidence." "No," Diane agreed. "It's not. They're moving him out of reach, out of our jurisdiction. By the time the trial starts, he'll be so far removed from this that his testimony will be worthless, even if we could compel it." "They knew," Rebecca said slowly. "They knew we'd try to talk to him. Or they were just being thorough," Diane said. "Either way, we've lost our best chance at a friendly witness." Rebecca leaned against the brick wall of the cafe, her eyes closed. She thought of Evan's face, the fear in his eyes, the way he'd looked at his phone and shut down completely. "Someone warned him," she said. "Someone told him I'd be there." "That's paranoid," Diane said, but her voice lacked certainty. "Is it?" Rebecca asked. "They've erased footage. They've coordinated statements. They've suspended me from my party and turned the media against me. Why wouldn't they be watching? Why wouldn't they know every move we make?" The line was silent for a long moment. "If that's true," Diane said finally, "then we're not just fighting a cover-up. We're fighting something bigger, something organized." Rebecca opened her eyes and looked up at the darkening sky. Somewhere in this city, Evans was packing his things, preparing to disappear into a new posting where he could forget what he'd seen. Somewhere, Stokes was recovering, preparing his own testimony, confident in his protection. And somewhere, the machinery of the Brotherhood was grinding forward, crushing anyone who stood in its way. "Then we'd better get organized too," Rebecca said. Amara was 17 minutes late, coming home from school, when Rebecca's phone rang. It wasn't Amara calling. It was a number Rebecca didn't recognize, local area code, and her first instinct was to ignore it. Reporters had been calling for days, trying different numbers, different tactics, hoping to catch her off guard. But something made her answer. "Ms. Cross?" The voice was male, professional, with an edge of false concern that made Rebecca's skin crawl. "This is Sergeant Hale from Brixton Station. I'm calling about your daughter." Rebecca's blood turned to ice. "What about my daughter?" "She's fine," Hale said quickly. "She's here with us. We pulled her over about 20 minutes ago. Routine traffic stop. But there's been a complication." Rebecca was already grabbing her keys, her bag, moving toward the door. "What kind of complication?" "Perhaps it's better if you come down to the station," Hale said. "We can discuss it in person." "Tell me now," Rebecca demanded, her voice sharp enough to cut. A pause. Then, "We found a small quantity of cannabis in her backpack during a search. Now I'm sure there's an explanation." Rebecca stopped moving. The world seemed to tilt sideways. "That's impossible. Amara doesn't use drugs." "I'm sure you believe that," Hale said, his tone dripping with condescension. But the evidence is here. We're trying to handle this discreetly, given the circumstances. Family matter and all. But you understand, we have procedures. I'm coming now, Rebecca said, and hung up before he could respond. The drive to the station took 12 minutes that felt like 12 hours. Rebecca's hands were white-knuckled on the steering wheel, her mind racing through possibilities, each one worse than the last. Amara didn't do drugs. She was a straight-A student, captain of the debate team, the kind of kid who still asked permission before staying out past 10. This was impossible. This was a setup. The station's front desk was manned by a young officer Rebecca didn't recognize. She gave her name, and within minutes Hale appeared, his expression a mask of professional sympathy that didn't reach his eyes. "Ms. Cross," he said, "thank you for coming so quickly. Your daughter is in interview room 2. She's not under arrest. I want to be clear about that. We're just trying to understand the situation." "I want to see her," Rebecca said. "Of course. But first, perhaps we could have a word. Privately." He led her to a different room, smaller, with no windows. The door closed behind them with a soft click that sounded like a trap springing shut. "Let me be frank with you," Hale said, leaning against the desk. "We both know this is a difficult time. The incident with Officer Stokes, the media attention, the stress. It affects families. Sometimes young people make poor choices when they're under pressure." "My daughter didn't make a poor choice," Rebecca said. "Someone planted drugs on her." Hale's eyebrows rose. "That's a serious accusation." "It's the truth." "Is it?" Hale tilted his head. "Or is it possible that you're so caught up in your own legal troubles that you're seeing conspiracies where there are none? That you're projecting your paranoia onto a situation that's actually quite straightforward?" Rebecca felt rage building in her chest, hot and dangerous. "Let me see my daughter." "In a moment," Hale said. "First, I want you to understand something. We're prepared to be lenient here. First offense, small quantity, good student. We could make this go away. A warning. Maybe some community service. No record, no impact on her university applications." He paused. "But that kind of leniency requires cooperation, goodwill, understanding." The implication hung in the air, like poison gas. "You want me to take a plea deal," Rebecca said slowly. "You want me to admit I attacked Stokes, and in exchange you'll make this disappear." Hale spread his hands. "I'm just saying that sometimes, the best thing a parent can do is put their child's welfare first. Pride is expensive, Miss Cross. Is yours worth your daughter's future?" Rebecca stared at him, at the smug certainty in his expression, and understood with perfect clarity that this was the point. This was where they expected her to break. They'd tried isolation, public humiliation, legal pressure. Now they were going after the one thing that mattered more to her than her own freedom. "I want to see Amara," she said again. "Now." Hale shrugged and opened the door. "Room 2, down the hall." Amara was sitting at a metal table, her school uniform rumpled, her eyes red from crying. When she saw Rebecca, she stood so quickly the chair scraped against the floor. "Mum," she said, her voice breaking. "Mum, I swear I didn't." Rebecca crossed the room and pulled her daughter into her arms. "I know, baby. I know." "They said they found it in my bag," Amara said into Rebecca's shoulder. "But I've never even seen drugs. I don't know how it got there. They pulled me over for no reason, said my taillight was out. But it wasn't. I checked this morning, and then they searched the car and my bag and—" "Shh," Rebecca said, stroking her daughter's hair. "It's okay. We're going to fix this." "They said I could go to jail," Amara whispered. "They said I'd have a record, that universities wouldn't accept me, that my whole life would be ruined." Rebecca pulled back, holding Amara's face in her hands. Listen to me. That's not going to happen. They're lying. They're trying to scare you. Scare us. Why? Amara asked, and the innocence in the question nearly broke Rebecca's heart. Because they're afraid, Rebecca said. Because they know I'm telling the truth, and they're desperate to make me stop. Amara's eyes widened. This is because of what happened with that officer. They're doing this to get to you. Yes. Then give them what they want, Amara said urgently. Tell them you're sorry. Take the deal. Whatever they want. I don't care about your career, Mum. I just want this to stop. Rebecca felt something crack inside her chest. The temptation was overwhelming. She could end this right now. One signature, one admission of guilt, and Amara would be safe. The charges would disappear. Life could return to some semblance of normal. Except it wouldn't. Because the lie would follow them forever. Because Stokes would still be out there, and still wearing his badge, still believing he was untouchable. Because the next woman he cornered, the next person he hurt, would be on Rebecca's conscience. I can't, Rebecca said quietly. Mum, if I give in now, Rebecca said, I'm telling them that this works, that they can threaten our family, plant evidence, destroy lives, and face no consequences. I'm telling every other person they've hurt that there's no point in fighting back. She gripped Amara's shoulders. I'm telling you that the truth doesn't matter. That power is all that counts. Is that what you want me to teach you? Amara's eyes filled with tears. I want you to be safe. I want that too, Rebecca said, but not at the cost of my soul. Well, not at the cost of everything I've taught you about standing up for what's right. They stood there in the sterile interview room, mother and daughter, while the weight of the decision settled between them. Finally, Amara wiped her eyes and straightened her shoulders. Rebecca saw herself in that gesture, the same stubborn pride, the same refusal to bend. Then fight, Amara said, her voice steady now. Fight them, and I'll fight with you. Rebecca pulled her daughter close again, her own eyes burning. We're going to need a better lawyer, she said. We're going to need a miracle, Amara replied. Those two, Rebecca agreed. When they walked out of the interview room together, Hale was waiting in the corridor. He looked at their faces, and his expression soured. So? He asked. Have you made a decision? Rebecca met his eyes without flinching. Yes. We'll see you in court. She took Amara's hand and walked past him, past the desk sergeant, past the officers who watched them with expressions ranging from pity to contempt. She didn't look back. Outside, in the parking lot, Amara said, Mum, I'm scared. Me too, baby, Rebecca admitted. Me too. But she didn't let go of her daughter's hand, and she didn't stop walking forward. The investigator's name was Marcus Okonkwo, and he looked nothing like what Rebecca had expected. She'd imagined someone older, grizzled, with the cynical eyes of a man who'd seen too much. Instead, Marcus was 32, wore vintage band t-shirts under blazers, and had the kind of infectious optimism that seemed wildly out of place given the circumstances. I don't do lost causes, he'd told her during their first meeting, 2 weeks after the incident with Amara. I do impossible cases. There's a difference. Now he sat across from Rebecca and Diane in Rebecca's living room, his laptop open on the coffee table, and the expression on his face was something Rebecca had almost forgotten existed. Hope. I found something, Marcus said. Diane leaned forward. The CCTV? Better, Marcus said. Or at least, more accessible. He turned the laptop so they could see the screen. I've spent the last 10 days tracking down everyone who was in that corridor. Witnesses, lawyers, clerks, anyone who might have seen something or recorded something. Most of them gave me nothing. Either they genuinely didn't see anything useful, or they'd been convinced to forget what they saw. "We know this already," Rebecca said, trying to keep the frustration out of her voice. She'd been living on 3 hours of sleep a night, jumping at every car that slowed outside her flat, watching Amara for signs of trauma. Her trial date was 6 weeks away, and they had nothing. "But there was one person I couldn't track down," Marcus continued. "A barrister named Simon Hartley. He'd been in court that day for a different case, finished early. He was waiting in the corridor for his client. According to the sign-in log, he left the building at 15:03, which is about 15 minutes after your incident." "So he wasn't there," Diane said. "That's what I thought," Marcus said. "But then I found his junior associate, a woman named Priya Mehta, and she told me something interesting. She said Hartley had been complaining all week about losing his dictaphone. Expensive one, digital recorder, the kind barristers use to make notes between sessions. He was convinced he'd left it somewhere in the courthouse." Rebecca felt something shift in her chest. "He left it in the corridor?" "He left it on a bench in the corridor," Marcus confirmed. "Priya remembered because he'd been recording notes about his case, set the device down while he took a phone call, then forgot about it in the rush to leave. By the time he realized it was missing, the courthouse was closed. He went back the next day, but it was gone." "Someone found it," Diane said. "Someone found it," Marcus agreed. "And according to the lost and found log, it was turned in by a clerk named Margaret Osai 3 days after the incident. She found it wedged between the bench cushions during a routine cleaning." 3 days, Rebecca said, after they'd already built their case, after the CCTV was erased. "Exactly," Marcus said. "No one thought to check it. Why would they? It was just a lost dictaphone, returned to its owner. Hartley got it back. Probably didn't even think about what might be on it." "Please tell me you talked to him," Diane said. Marcus's grin widened. "I did better than that. When I convinced him to let me examine the device, told him it might contain evidence relevant to an ongoing case. He was reluctant at first, client confidentiality and all that. But when I explained the situation, he agreed." He clicked a key on his laptop. The device was recording when he set it down. Voice activated. It kept recording until the battery died, which was approximately 47 minutes later. Rebecca's hands were shaking. "Does it have the assault?" "It has everything," Marcus said quietly. He clicked another key, and an audio waveform appeared on the screen. "The bench was about 20 feet from where you and Stokes were standing. The audio quality isn't perfect. There's background noise, people walking, doors opening and closing, but it's clear enough." He pressed play. The sound that came through the laptop speakers was muffled at first, indistinct. Footsteps, murmured conversations. Then, cutting through the ambient noise, a voice Rebecca recognized immediately. Her own voice, measured and controlled. "Officer Stokes, I don't think this is an appropriate conversation to have here." A male voice, rough and aggressive. "Stokes. I think it's the perfect place. You've been running your mouth all day in there, making us look like thugs. Someone needs to teach you some respect. I'm simply doing my job as an MP. If you have concerns about my conduct, you can file a formal complaint." "Formal complaint," Stokes repeated, his voice dripping with contempt. "You people always hide behind your paperwork, don't you? Think your fancy title makes you better than us? I think my title means I represent the public interest, which includes holding police accountable when they abuse their power." A pause. Then Stokes again, his voice lower, more menacing. "You need to watch yourself. Accidents happen, especially to mouthy bitches who don't know their place." Rebecca heard her own sharp intake of breath on the recording. Then her voice, harder now. "Are you threatening me, officer?" I'm educating you, Stokes said. Then came the sound. A crack, sharp and unmistakable, flesh striking flesh. Rebecca flinched hearing it, the memory of pain flashing across her face, her voice on the recording, shocked and furious. You don't get to put your hands on me. Stokes laughing. What are you going to do about it, love? File a complaint? Who do you think they'll believe? Then chaos. A grunt, a heavy thud, shouting. Multiple voices overlapping. He's down! Get her! Someone call medical! Marcus stopped the playback. The silence in the room was deafening. There's more, Marcus said. After you were taken away, there's about 10 minutes of officers talking. They're not close to the bench, so it's harder to make out, but I've cleaned up the audio. You can hear them discussing what to say, how to frame it. One of them, I think it's Hale, explicitly says, we need to get our stories straight before anyone asks questions. Diane was staring at the laptop like it was the Holy Grail. This is it, she said. This is everything we need. It proves she was assaulted first. It proves self-defense. It proves they coordinated their statements. It proves they're liars, Rebecca said, her voice thick with emotion. She'd been carrying the weight of doubt for weeks, the insidious whisper that maybe no one would believe her, that maybe the truth didn't matter. Now, hearing her own voice, hearing Stokes's threats and his violence captured in digital amber, she felt something she hadn't felt since the moment the handcuffs clicked shut. Vindication. Can we use this in court? She asked. Absolutely, Diane said. It's admissible. Found property. No expectation of privacy in a public courthouse corridor. Hartley's willing to testify about the chain of custody. This is solid. Marcus closed his laptop. There's one more thing. I made copies. Multiple copies. Cloud storage. Physical drives. Sent to trusted contacts. Also, if anything happens to the original, we have backups. You think they'll try to destroy it? Rebecca said. I think they've already destroyed evidence once, Marcus said. I'm not giving them the chance to do it again. Rebecca stood and walked to the window, looking out at the street below. The reporters had thinned out over the past week, moving on to fresher scandals, but she could still see one van parked across the street, waiting. When do we tell them we have this? She asked. We don't, Diane said. Not until trial. We let them commit to their version of events. Let them testify under oath that you attacked first, that Stokes was the victim. Then we play the recording and watch their case collapse. Rebecca turned back to face them. They'll know something's changed. They'll see it in how we're acting. Let them wonder, Diane said. Let them sweat. Marcus packed up his laptop, slinging his bag over his shoulder. At the door, he paused. For what it's worth, Miss Cross, I've been doing this job for 8 years. I've seen a lot of people get crushed by the system. It's nice for once to see someone fight back and actually have a chance of winning. After he left, Rebecca and Diane sat in silence for a long moment. We might actually win this, Rebecca said finally. We're going to win this, Diane corrected, and then we're going to make sure everyone knows exactly what they tried to do to you. Rebecca thought of Stokes, recovering in his home, confident in his protection. She thought of Hale and the others, believing they'd covered their tracks perfectly. She thought of Evans, exiled to Surrey, carrying the weight of his cowardice. They have no idea what's coming, she said. Diane smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. No, she agreed. They really don't. The courtroom smelled like old wood and nervous sweat. Rebecca sat at the defense table, her hands folded in her lap, her posture perfect. She'd chosen her outfit carefully. A navy suit, modest jewelry, her hair pulled back in a simple bun. She looked like what she was, A professional woman, a public servant, someone who belonged in halls of power, not criminal courts. Across the aisle, Officer Peter Stokes sat with his legal team, his uniform pressed to razor-sharp creases, his face arranged in an expression of wounded dignity. The fading yellow of a bruise still shadowed his temple. He'd milked that injury for everything it was worth, appearing at press conferences with his head bandaged, his wife beside him, talking about the trauma of being attacked without provocation. The gallery was packed. Reporters filled the back rows, and their notebooks ready. Rebecca could feel their eyes on her, hungry for the next headline. Behind them sat members of the public, some sympathetic, most simply curious to see how the mighty would fall. Judge Patricia Henshaw entered, and everyone rose. She was in her 60s, with steel-grey hair and a reputation for running a tight courtroom. Rebecca had researched her extensively. Fair but strict. No tolerance for theatrics. Good. The prosecution's opening statement was delivered by Crown Prosecutor James Whitmore, a man who wore his expensive education like armor. He painted a picture of Rebecca as a woman who'd let power go to her head, who'd used her position to harass and belittle police officers, who'd finally snapped when confronted about her behavior. Officer Stokes was simply doing his job, Whitmore said, his voice resonant with practiced sincerity. He approached Ms. Cross to discuss her conduct during the hearing. She became aggressive, hostile, and when Officer Stokes attempted to de-escalate the situation, she attacked him with the trained precision of a competitive fighter. Ladies and gentlemen, this was not self-defense. This was assault. Calculated, brutal, and entirely unprovoked. Diane's opening was quieter, more measured. She didn't make grand pronouncements. She simply asked the jury to keep an open mind, to consider that things might not be as simple as the prosecution claimed, to remember that truth often hides beneath the surface. My client is here today because she refused to be a victim, Diane said. Because when a man in a position of power put his hands on her, she defended herself. And the prosecution will try to make you forget that crucial detail. Don't let them. The first 2 days of trial were brutal. The prosecution paraded witnesses through the stand, each one telling the same carefully rehearsed story. Sergeant Hale testified that he'd seen Rebecca approach Stokes aggressively. Officer Brennan described Rebecca's wild expression, her threatening body language. A medical expert detailed Stokes's injuries, concussion, bruised ribs, psychological trauma. Diane cross-examined each witness with surgical precision, finding small inconsistencies, planting seeds of doubt, but never revealing her hand. She played the role of the outmatched defense attorney, fighting hard but seemingly losing ground. Rebecca watched it all with a calm that surprised even herself. She'd been terrified walking into the courthouse that first morning, convinced that the weight of the system would crush her. But now, sitting here, listening to lie after lie, she felt something else. Certainty. They'd committed to their story. They'd testified under oath, and soon, very soon, it would all come crashing down. On the third day, Peter Stokes took the stand. He looked good up there, Rebecca had to admit. Confident but not cocky. Wounded but not weak. He'd been coached well. He described the incident with the kind of detail that sounded authentic, painting himself as a professional trying to do his job, confronted by an irrational woman who'd attacked without warning. I tried to calm her down, Stokes said, his voice steady. I could see she was upset. I understand the hearing had been stressful. I just wanted to talk, to de-escalate, but she wouldn't listen. She started shouting, getting in my face. I raised my hands like this, he demonstrated, palms out, defensive, to create some space, and that's when she hit me." "You didn't strike Ms. Cross?" Whitmore asked. "Absolutely not," Stokes said, looking directly at the jury. "I would never. I'm a police officer. I'm trained to de-escalate, not to escalate. I've never raised a hand to anyone who wasn't an immediate threat." "And was Ms. Cross a threat?" "Not until she attacked me," Stokes said. "I was completely blindsided." Whitmore nodded, satisfied. "No further questions." Judge Henshaw looked at Diane. "Cross-examination." Diane stood slowly, gathering her notes. Rebecca saw the shift in her posture, the predator emerging from beneath the professional veneer. "Officer Stokes," Diane began, and her voice pleasant, almost conversational. "You testified that you never struck Ms. Cross. Is that correct?" "That's correct," Stokes said. "You never put your hands on her in any way." "Only to defend myself after she attacked me." "I see." Diane walked to the defense table and picked up a small device. "Your Honor, I'd like to introduce Defense Exhibit A, a digital audio recording recovered from the courthouse on the day of the incident." The courtroom erupted. Whitmore was on his feet immediately. "Objection! We were never informed, Sword, of any audio recording. This is a clear violation of discovery rules." "The recording was only recently obtained," Diane said calmly. "We filed notice with the court 48 hours ago, as required. The prosecution received a copy yesterday." Judge Henshaw frowned. "Is this true, Mr. Whitmore?" Whitmore's jaw worked. "We received a notice, yes, but we haven't had adequate time to review." "You've had 24 hours, Diane said. "The recording is 17 minutes long. That's more than adequate time." "I'll allow it," Judge Henshaw said. "But Ms. Chen, any more surprises, and we'll have problems." "No more surprises, Your Honor," Diane said. She connected the device to the courtroom's audio system. "This recording was made on a dictaphone belonging to Barrister Simon Hartley, who inadvertently left it on a bench in the courthouse corridor. The device was voice-activated and captured the interaction between Officer Stokes and Miss Cross." Rebecca watched Stokes's face. The color had drained from it. His eyes darted to his legal team, to Hale sitting in the gallery, to the exits. He knew. He knew exactly what was on that recording. Diane pressed play. The courtroom fell silent as Rebecca's voice filled the space, calm and professional. Then Stokes's voice, aggressive, threatening. The slur, the crack of flesh on flesh. Rebecca's shocked response, Stokes's laughter. The jury's faces transformed. Shock, disgust, anger. When the recording reached the part where the officers discussed coordinating their stories, several jurors were shaking their heads. Diane stopped the playback. The silence that followed was absolute. "Officer Stokes," Diane said quietly, "would you like to revise your testimony?" Stokes's hands were gripping the witness box so hard his knuckles had gone white. That's taken out of context. You don't understand the situation." "The context," Diane said, her voice hardening, "is that you assaulted a member of Parliament in a courthouse corridor, threatened her, and then lied about it under oath. Is that the context you'd like to provide?" "She was provoking me," Stokes exploded, half rising from his seat. "All day, sitting in that courtroom, making us look like criminals, like we're the bad guys. Someone needed to put her in her place." The courtroom erupted again. Judge Henshaw's gavel cracked like thunder. "Order. Officer Stokes, sit down." But Stokes wasn't done. Weeks of confidence, of believing he was untouchable, had given way to panic and rage. "You don't know what it's like," he snarled, pointing at Rebecca. "People like her, always judging, always criticizing, never understanding what we deal with every day. She deserved." "Officer Stokes!" Judge Henshaw's voice cut through his tirade. "Or sit down and be silent, or I will hold you in contempt." Stokes sat, but the damage was done. The jury had seen behind the mask. They'd seen the real man, the one who believed his badge gave him the right to put women in their place. Diane let the moment breathe. Then, almost gently, she said, "No further questions." Whitmore tried to salvage it on redirect, but there was nothing left to save. Stokes had confessed, not in words, perhaps, but in rage, in his complete inability to maintain the fiction of the professional officer wronged. When court adjourned for the day, Rebecca walked out with her head high. The reporters shouted questions, but she didn't answer. She didn't need to. The truth had spoken for itself. The jury deliberated for 3 hours and 42 minutes. Rebecca spent every second of that time in a small conference room adjacent to the courtroom, unable to eat, unable to sit still, pacing the worn carpet like a somed animal. Diane sat at the table, projecting a calm Rebecca knew was at least partially performance. 3 hours is good, she said. It means they're being thorough, taking it seriously. Or it means they're deadlocked, Rebecca said. It means some of them still believe him. After what they heard, after what they saw. Diane shook her head. No, they're just doing their due diligence. They'll come back with the right verdict. Rebecca wanted to believe her, but she'd learned over the past months that justice wasn't guaranteed, that truth didn't always win, and that the system could chew you up and spit you out even when you'd done nothing wrong. When the bailiff knocked on the door to tell them the jury had reached a verdict, Rebecca's legs nearly gave out. The walk back into the courtroom felt like walking to an execution. The gallery had filled again, word having spread that a decision was imminent. Rebecca saw Amara in the second row, her daughter's face tight with anxiety. She saw Marcus, her investigator, giving her a subtle thumbs up. She saw reporters with their pens poised, ready to write her ending. Stokes sat at the prosecution table, his posture rigid. He'd been subdued since his outburst yesterday, his lawyers having clearly read him the riot act. But Rebecca could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw worked constantly, grinding teeth. He looked like a man barely holding himself together. Judge Henshaw entered. Everyone rose. The jury filed in, 12 faces carefully neutral, trained not to give anything away before the verdict was read. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" Judge Henshaw asked. The forewoman stood, a middle-aged black woman in a purple cardigan who'd taken meticulous notes throughout the trial. "We have, Your Honor. In the matter of the Crown versus Rebecca Cross, on the charge of assault occasioning actual bodily harm, how do you find?" The pause before she spoke felt like an eternity. "Not guilty." The courtroom exploded. Gasps, shouts, the crack of Judge Henshaw's gavel demanding order. Rebecca felt Diane's hand grip her arm, felt her own knees buckle slightly. "Not guilty." The words echoed in her head. Not quite real yet. Not quite believable. Furthermore, the forewoman continued, her voice cutting through the chaos, the jury wishes to express our concern regarding the conduct of the police officers involved in this case. We believe perjury charges should be considered. Judge Henshaw nodded gravely. "The court thanks the jury for their service. Ms. Cross, you are free to go. All charges are dismissed." Rebecca turned to embrace Diane, but movement at the prosecution table caught her eye. Stokes was standing. His face had gone purple, veins bulging in his neck. His lawyers were trying to pull him back down, but he shook them off with violent jerks of his arms. "This is bullshit," he roared. "Absolute bullshit. You people don't know what you've done. You've just told every criminal in this city that they can assault police officers and get away with it." "Officer Stokes," Judge Henshaw warned, her gavel cracking again. "You will control yourself or be removed from this courtroom." But Stokes was beyond control. Weeks of confidence had curdled into humiliation, and he was unraveling in real time. She attacked me. I'm the victim here. I'm the one who got put in the hospital. But because she's an MP, because she's— He didn't finish the sentence, but everyone in the courtroom heard what he didn't say. The slur hung in the air, unspoken but unmistakable. Diane stood, her voice calm but carrying. Your Honor, I think Officer Stokes is demonstrating quite clearly the temperament that led to this incident in the first place. Temperament? Stokes spun toward her, his eyes wild. You want to talk about temperament? You people come in here with your tricks and your lies, twisting everything, making heroes out of criminals. He was moving now, coming around the prosecution table, his hands clenched into fists. His lawyers were shouting at him to stop. The bailiffs were moving to intercept. But Stokes was focused entirely on Diane, his rage finding a target. You destroyed my career, he shouted, closing the distance. My reputation. Everything I've worked for. For what? For her. He lunged. The bailiffs caught him before he reached Diane, 3 of them tackling him to the ground. Stokes fought them, thrashing, screaming obscenities that echoed off the wood-paneled walls. It took 4 men to restrain him, to get the handcuffs on, to drag him toward the door as he continued to rage. You'll pay for this, he screamed, his eyes locked on Rebecca now. All of you. You think this is over? You think— The door closed behind him, cutting off his tirade. The courtroom sat in stunned silence. Judge Henshaw's face was carved from stone. Let the record show that Officer Peter Stokes has been taken into custody for contempt of court and threatening behavior. I am referring this matter to the Crown Prosecution Service for additional charges. She looked at Rebecca. Ms. Cross, on behalf of this court, I apologize for what you've endured. Justice has been delayed, but it has not been denied. Rebecca nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Outside the courthouse, the scene was pandemonium. News crews had set up a gauntlet of cameras and microphones. Protesters held signs, some supporting Rebecca, others denouncing her. Police officers lined the steps, their expressions unreadable. Rebecca emerged into the afternoon sunlight with Diane on one side and Amara on the other. The questions came in a torrent, but she raised her hand, and gradually the crowd quieted. 3 months ago, Rebecca said, her voice steady and clear, I was assaulted by a police officer who believed his badge made him untouchable. When I defended myself, the system tried to destroy me. They erased evidence. They threatened my family. They used every tool at their disposal to protect one of their own and punish me for refusing to be a victim. She paused, looking out at the sea of faces. But I'm standing here today because the truth is stronger than their lies. Because there are still people, investigators, lawyers, the ordinary citizens, who believe that justice matters more than protecting the powerful. This verdict isn't just about me. It's about every person who's been told to stay silent, to accept abuse, to let the system grind them down. A reporter shouted a question about whether she'd return to Parliament. Rebecca smiled, and it was the smile of a fighter who'd just won the bout of her life. I'm not going anywhere, she said. In fact, I'm just getting started. There are going to be inquiries, investigations, reforms, because what happened to me happens to people every day. People who don't have the resources or platform to fight back. That ends now. She descended the courthouse steps with her head high, and the crowd parted before her. Some people applauded, others simply stared, witnessing the birth of something they didn't quite have words for yet. Legend felt too small a word for what Rebecca Cross had become. She was proof. Proof that the system could be beaten. Proof that truth could win. Proof that even when they came at you with everything they had, you could stand your ground and emerge not just intact, but stronger. Amara squeezed her mother's hand. "You did it, Mum." Rebecca squeezed back. "We did it, baby. We did it." Behind them, through the courthouse windows, Peter Stokes was being processed into custody, his uniform stripped away, his badge confiscated, his future reduced to the same uncertainty he'd tried to impose on Rebecca. The hunter had become the hunted, and justice, delayed but not denied, had finally come home. 3 weeks later, as the Independent Office for Police Conduct announced a full investigation into the Brotherhood, Sergeant Hale, Officer Brennan, and 4 others were suspended pending criminal charges for perjury and conspiracy to pervert the course of justice. Constable Evans reached for comment at his new posting in Surrey, declined to speak, but those who knew him said he looked like a man carrying a weight he'd never be able to put down. Rebecca returned to Parliament to a standing ovation from half the chamber and stony silence from the other half. She didn't care. She had work to do. The story of the MP who knocked out a corrupt cop and then knocked down the system protecting him became the kind of legend that gets told in law schools and police academies, in community centers and courtrooms. Some versions emphasized the physical fight, while others focused on the legal battle. But all of them ended the same way, with Rebecca Cross walking out of that courthouse, not as a victim, not as a defendant, but as exactly what she'd always been, a champion. So what do you think? Did Rebecca do the right thing by fighting back? Or should she have taken the plea deal to protect her daughter? And could you have stayed as composed as she did when the entire system turned against you? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of justice, resilience, and one woman's refusal to be broken by a corrupt system, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss a story. We have an incredible tale coming up next week about a whistleblower who exposes a pharmaceutical company's deadly cover-up, only to find herself hunted by the very people she trusted. You don't want to miss it. Thanks for watching, and remember, the truth might get buried, but it never stays down forever.